I'm Glory Mutungi, the current chair, Kenya Association of Technical Training Institutions, and also the chief principal, Nairobi Technical Training Institute.
My name is Dr. Edwin Tarno. I'm the chief principal at Kenya Technical Trainers College here in Nairobi. Soon it will be converting to Kenya School of TVET, which will be launched on 16th of November 2022.
Katti was formed way back 1997. That is exactly 25 years from today. And that is one of the things why we are celebrating our silver jubilee. It was started so that the principals of TVET institutions would come together to advocate for TVET sector.
Katti did a lot of things. One, they started from curricula. They are involved in curriculum design, what were the best courses for the institutions, and they were also deciding which course will be domiciled. Instead of having repetitions, this college doing the same thing as the other college, we were looking at those things and rationalizing so that if you are interested in a particular program, you knew where it was supposed to be put. We also looked at the welfare, the general welfare of those who are working in technical training institutions, right from principals to the workers of those institutions. And I think we did quite a lot with the ministry. We also brought a lot of harmony among the institutions. We taught good practices. We never had issues of malpractices in terms of mismanagement because we were exchanging views time and again.
There are issues which all of them had to handle, particularly with the ministry in common and several areas of interest. At that time, it is the Harambee Institutes of Technology that had an association called KITA, Kenya Institutes of Technology Association, at that time, that were championing issues that were of common interest to those institutions. So when we met with the then the first minister for technical training, the late Dr. Onyonka, it is Dr. Onyonka who felt that he did not want to deal with the same issues with three different groups dealing basically with one thing. And at a meeting called in this particular institution, the Kenya Polytechnic, he suggested that we should have an association so that he can be approached by one body.
While serving at KTTC as principal, I was, as a matter of principle and a matter of policy, a member of the Kenya Association of Technical Training Institutions, Katti. This association was a forum for heads of the technical institutions to propagate policy and key issues of technical training institutions in the country. And it was the only association that would speak for the technical training institutions, which through forums like meetings, conferences, and other congregations that were official. We had also delegations to the ministry to express our wishes or our interests. We also had delegations to the Teacher Service Commission, which was our employer by then. And we also included the other cadres of administration, like registrars, deputy principals. They would also meet and give us feedback, exchange the good practices, and do all things that associations do.
Katti was a small organization, was a small association in terms of membership and in terms of activities that we are involved in. But over the years, so many changes has taken place. So when I took over as the chairman of Katti in 2010, the activities that were there was to do the changes in the TVET system in this country. And remember, is the time that the new constitution was enacted, and we had the new constitution of 2010, and from that time we had to think of transforming TVET institutions in this country. And Katti was very instrumental in bringing up the TVET Act of 2013. I'm happy to say we are among the people who drafted this act, and it was enacted in 2013, and TVETA was founded through the TVET Act. Then from there, we came up to formulate other changes in the TVET through the Act, and that is when we came up with the CDAC, the Curriculum Development and Accreditation and Certification Council. And by the time I was leaving Katti as the chairman, we had already started working together with the TVETA and the government to start off or to come up with the Kenya National Qualification Authority.
My take as chairman of Kenya Association of Technical Training Institutions. I was the chairman of Kenya Association of Technical Training Institutions, Katti, from 2012 up to 2016. I did 2 terms as a chairman, the full term that is required by the constitution of Katti. It was a very interesting time. I was relatively younger. I think I was the youngest chairman ever at that time. And we had so many issues that came up at that time, very interesting challenges, including the change of into the new constitution. In 2012 and 2011 and 13, we were creating the new TVET Act, and Katti took part as a task force member in the committee that then took care of the transition, not only from the old constitution, but also to creation of the TVET Act that never existed before. We had a lot of also interesting challenges during my time, including the opportunities of expanding the technical training institutions through the Kibaki regime. If you remember 2013 to 2014, the initial 50 institutions were put in place to grow. I was the chairman, and I was tasked to even designing the first designs of those colleges. And I'm happy that we also managed to start that, what is now called the expansion of TVET.
Those days, there were very few TVET institutions. There were no elections. They would sit down as a club and agree, you are the chairperson, you are the vice, you are the secretary. Currently, we are over 200 members, and we have a well-structured regional representation. We had 5 regions, but under the new constitution, which we have already reviewed and approved, we are 9 regions. Every region is represented by a chairperson elected by that region, and then we have committees with the chairpersons that forms now the governing council of Katti, which is now headed by a national chairperson, who I am currently.
The growth has been quite enormous, because at the time of establishing it, there were only 3 polytechnics and 17 Harambee Institutes of Technology and another 19 technical training institutes at that time. So that was basically the membership of Katti. If you look at it, the total number of technical institutions that were members, you can sum up to something like about 30 something about 37 also. But as we talk today, I think there are 13 polytechnics. We have also 2 technical universities, which are also still members of Katti. We have over 300 other TVET institutions. We have also institutions from the private sectors who are also members of Katti. There are also institutions in other public institutions, not within the Ministry of Education. But you can see when it started as an organization of institutions within the Ministry of Education or technical training at one time.
During my time, there were many interesting challenges, the legal ones, the social ones. There were also issues of academic issues. You remember that is also the time when the TVET Act then came into place, and therefore TVET Authority then came into position. And many challenges that came with it, including the creation of the TVET SIDAC, which required our members to really take part in formulating new policies, the competence-based education and training. So we had very many varied interests during my term, and also we had very interesting growth. That is also the time we joined the World Federation of Colleges, and also we have been members of the Commonwealth Association of Polytechnics in Africa. I was also privileged to host the Continental Commonwealth Association of Polytechnics in Africa conference in Mombasa during my tenure. A very tough time, and we were able to work together with the colleagues in our association to make it work.
We have become a state department, the TVET institutions, through lobbying of Katti. We have a TVET Act 2013. That was another product of lobbying of Katti that is addressing purely issues of TVET. This is the act that came up with TVETA, the authority. It came up with the TVET SIDAC, the body that also develops curriculums for TVET institutions, and the State Department.
Katti has played a leading role, particularly in the reform of TVET, which we started vigorously in the year 2002. So it is Katti Katti used to hold a series of conferences, and each conference has a theme to address, some matters to address. Like the first conference dealt with the challenges and the challenges for TVET, and we had also to propose what we consider a solution to the challenges. But that's one of them. But the Katti conference of 2002 is the one which came up with the strategies necessary for improving or reforming TVET. And we wrote a memorandum which went then to the various leaders of parties that were likely to form the government in the subsequent election. So that is where we proposed a number of things to be done. That is where we posed the structure. Like right now, you have an organization called TVETA. TVETA is the one which now regulates technical education. That was one of the proposals from Katti. We had issues of funding, which was a problem, the issue of technical education, and we made several proposals of funding. We now have the TVET Act. For all the time, TVET has always operated with education, within the Education Act, which had no reference to technical education at all. It was by association used because TVET also as education element, but there was nothing specific to TVET. So, therefore, the enactment of the TVET Act, that is a product of the efforts of Katti. The upgrading of the Mombasa Polytechnic and the Kenya Polytechnic to university status, what we have now, that was spearheaded by Katti, and I was basically the prime mover to do that one. So those are significant developments in this country. We are working with the government, but there were certain things that we were able to move, probably to make them move faster. But we worked with the government quite a lot in all of these.
We have several partners, and just to inform you of some of the things that Katti does. Katti has TVET fairs that includes robotic competitions and showcasing of innovations of students from all the departments that are offered in TVET institutions. We have been able to bring on board several partners. GIZ is one of them. We have been able to bring ADB, African Development Bank. We were able to bring in the China government, which used actually to support the robotics until late 2016 there. And we have several other partners that are partnering with different institutions like CICAN through KFEP. We also have the ADB, that's African Bank. We have other partners that are assisting national polytechnics, 3 of them, through ESTRIP, the World Bank, and many others, even internal, who are not from external countries, that are working with us. Through the introduction of dual training, 7 of our institutions, members of Katti, are partnering with GIZ to offer dual training. Nairobi TTA is one of them, KIST, Thika, Bumbe, Riyadh, and another 3 from Western Kenya. And these are developments that have come because of the lobbying and making the government realize that without TVET, we are not going to achieve the Vision 2030.
Katti has a lot of roles that are relevant for us to do. Katti is an association of technical institutions, both public and private, and also it is an association that deals with professional growth of TVET institutions in Kenya. I'm happy to say that it also advises government. If you look at the instruments that create Katti, it advises government on various issues. Katti has been able to run continental research and development conferences. This is something that we don't take lightly. There are very few organizations across Africa that are able to run annual international conferences. We also run our sports and recreation activities. So I think Katti has played a very critical role in making TVET a better place to be. I also want to remember that Katti represents us in various bodies. It represents us in Kenya Universities and Colleges Central Admission Board. It will be representing us in Kenya School of TVET. It will be representing us in Kenya. It represents us in Kenya National Examinations Council, and even in TVET SIDAC and many other organizations that we professionally undertake to uphold the Kenyan TVET system.
The biggest highlight is the need to revamp TVET, to reform TVET, to accommodate the industries in both training, apprenticeship, attachments, and even training. We are looking forward to making the government see the need of revamping the funding of TVET. Currently, we feel we are underfunded. If you look at the government budget towards TVET, it is the minimum. Emphasis is laid on basic education, and we feel to an extent to the universities. It is only in 2018 when we started getting capitation through the lobbying of Katti again. We had a sitting with the current president, by then he was the deputy president, and we brought it out that the low enrollment in TVET institutions was caused by lack of funding for the trainees. Majority of our students come from the day schools where they are getting free education and they cannot afford the college education. From 2018, the government, which we are very grateful to it, they gave that 1,000 capitation to every TVET trainee. That one tripled the enrollment in TVET institutions, because now TVET became technically like free, because once they got that 1,000 capitation from the government, they could still apply for 40,000 from HELB, which was only funding universities by then. With that 70,000, the student is able to pay the school fees and also get some upkeep. This has really assisted the TVET trainees.
Sometimes risks come if you do not have resources to run the organization. With that large membership, Katti has now reasonable resources, and they can only grow. The other one, if you get involved in politics, that can be a risk. Katti has not been involved in politics, and I hope it will not be involved in politics. The Constitution, as I left it, says that Katti is non-political. It is not a political body. But if you get into politics, you know what happens. Well, unless one person, you see, like the great nut nearly collapsed. But it nearly collapsed because probably when you get closer to politics, that becomes a problem. So as long as they remain true to why it was established, then I don't see a problem.
The future of TVET is very bright. I am happy that the new government has taken TVET in its manifesto as a critical partner in creation of wealth for the youth and also closing in the skills gap that is existing currently.
For the last 2 years, we didn't receive 2 quotas amounting to 15,000 per student. That one compromises the quality of training because the fees is capped at 56,420. That 1,000 is capitation. When we don't receive that capitation, it means the quality of training goes down. This money is used to purchase training materials. Without training materials for TVET, it means you give substandard training. This 25th celebration, it shows that for us to be recognized playing a great role in provision of the quality education that is required to address the labor needs of this country and to make Kenya become a middle income country by 2030, we need to increase the budget for training. The next thing is human resource. The TVET institutions are understaffed. We are happy. The minister the other day confirmed that we are going to have 3,000 recruited from January. This is a number that should have been recruited this year. But because of the constraints of the financing, it has been pushed maybe to next year. That will not sort the issue of shortage, but at least it will address to some extent. We are looking at a ratio of 25 trainees to 1 trainer, especially in practicals, if we have to talk of quality training. And to achieve that ratios, we need almost 12,000 trainers in the whole country. The government has been building TVET institutions in every constituency, which we really appreciate because it has really increased the access. A student can move from the village to the TVET institution near to their home and get the training that they require so that they can at least get a livelihood for themselves. The government has also equipped the new institutions with state-of-the-art equipment. The challenge is the old institutions. Because as they create the new institutions and give them the equipment, they are not doing the same to the existing institutions. A good example is Nairobi Technical Training Institute. In 2018, we had an enrollment of around 2,000 students. Currently, we are 9,000 students. The government has not given any development funding for the last 5 years. If you look out, most of our big institutions, the tents are used as tuition rooms. Like if it rains like it is raining today, the learning stops. Those are the challenges that we are saying once we meet the partners, the government agencies, we'll be able to address during these celebrations.
These new bodies which have transformed TVET over the years could not have been there were it not for the initiation of Katti as an association. At the same time, or during that time, we also had to think of other changes, and when the government came in of by 2013, through the TNA and ULP, they came up with a policy of having a TVET institution in every constituency. And Katti was given the responsibility to come up with the plans and the drawings so that the Ministry of Education could adapt them through the Directorate of Technical Education. So Katti is the one that came up with the plans that are being used now to construct all the new technical training institutions or vocational training centers in this country in every constituency.
TVET has become more popular than it has been before. This may not necessarily for this interview, but I want to tell you that I am one of the founding students of technical secondary schools. I'm one of the people who went to technical secondary schools when the then trade schools were converted to secondary schools after the recommendations of the Uminde Report of 1965. And I have seen it. During that time, when I was going to Form 1, I had a lot of problems with my community because they only knew St. Mary's School, Yala, and Maseno, and anybody who did not go to that place was lost. And because I had 3 A's, it was expected that I would get a scholarship into places like Alliance. So when I went to Sigalagala, it was seen during that time when we were in secondary schools, it's when the late Tom Boyer would come to our institution and say, what are these failures doing here? They are spoiling milk because there's what called a lathe machine. And when you are working on it, you have to cool it. There's something called a cooler. Tom Boyer saw it as milk. And we were simply failures. And yet, we were some of the people who also qualified to go to Alliance. They didn't realize the technical secondary schools were then established as national schools. And that's why some of us would. But that is how technical education was. That is how technical education was perceived. So that if you went to a technical school, you went because you didn't have brains. So even some of us who happen to have some little brain were seen that way. But now you can see people now talk about technical education positively. People now know what is happening. And this is why we now have universities like this one, dedicated to areas of technical education.
Every TVET institution has collaborations with a number of industries that surround that institution. We have a department we call liaison office. This is the office that engages the institution with the industry. You sign MOUs, institution to the industry, and some have gone further to start now the dual training, which is 50 training in the institution and 50% training in the institution. This makes the trainee market ready. Most of them get absorbed by these industries we are working with. All the other programs, they go for attachment between 3 to 5 months after every module. And every institution has a number of industries that are partnering with that institution to attach their students. The challenge is all the students go for attachment almost the same time. And majority of our trainees are not getting attachment places. Some of our institutions are in the rural areas. There are no industries in those areas. It's a challenge that we are also addressing with our government to make sure they entice the industries to absorb the graduates of TVET for attachment or internship. This can be done through tax rebates, tax holidays, or even subsidizing their imports if they are attaching students from the TVET institutions. Because remember, the industries, they're there to do business. If they look at our trainees as disruption of their production line, then it becomes a disadvantage to us. But if they look at us as people who are training for them, they will train with us. And this is one of the things that we are really looking forward to government to assist that collaboration in a structured way, industry and the TVET institutions.
We also wish well Katti as it celebrates its 25 years. I have been a member for long. I think I'm the longest serving member so far because I've been around as a principal for a longer time than most of my colleagues. And therefore I've worked in Katti in various categories, starting from being a chairman of sports and moving all the way to being the chairman of Katti itself. And currently I'm the trustee of Katti. And I think very soon then I should be able to move to other aspects that may not be necessary around that particular domain. But I wish Katti well. We just need to have a strong organization. We must maintain professionalism. And above all, we must seek strong persons that can be able to protect the interests of Katti and perpetuate Katti's interests. This is not a very easy task. I have been in it for a long time. You need strong people. You need people with focus and vision. You need people who have the energy and the drive to move Katti to the next level. We must remain united if Katti has to come to the next level of the next 25 years before we do the Golden Jubilee. We need people with focus, people with strength, and people with a lot of vision on what Katti should be. Our plan is to make Katti to move to the next level, which is consultancy. We have been able to do a lot of work in terms of training across several areas in the East Africa region. We now need to move to the next level in which Katti then becomes a consultancy firm that can be able to undertake work on behalf of government or work on behalf of the TVET authorities or work on behalf of any sector that we believe should be able to require the services of the TVET systems across Africa.